Hi, Rob Lamb, Newfound Strength. We are going to be making a second video about the double leg hamstring stretch. The first video talked a lot about some of the details, the factors you need to know to make it a safe and productive session for you, such as the speed that you move, the force that you use, the amount of effort, and the distance that you travel from start to finish, and the number of reps. So please make sure you've watched that video prior to this one. So in that video, I had talked about the demonstrations I was doing that my feet were straight and they were about hip socket to hip width apart. The stretches could all be done with your feet even a little bit wider than hip width. They can even be done noticeably wider, and all those things will make differences in how you feel and where you feel the stretches in the hamstrings and or even going up through the hips. So please experiment with those different foot widths. You should do many repetitions with your legs at multiple widths. So in the previous video when I talked about how you needed to do many, at that time I was speaking to at one width position. You needed to do many repetitions to get that very effective done through those fibers, get the stretch done through those fibers. And then when you move out, you'll actually be stretching different fibers within your hamstring, and you will notice that when you get a lot of those done, and you'll feel much better and you'll appreciate it. So here I wanted to tell you a little bit more about turning the legs in and out to get to the outer hamstrings by turning the feet out, and getting to the inner hamstrings by turning the feet and the legs in. So if we were going to go after the outer hamstrings, and the outer hamstrings are going to put a lot of pressure around your hips and your lower back. So if you're a fragile back, a bad back person, turning your legs outboard is very much going to give you some relief. So my feet are only, right now, my heels are underneath my hips, and I've just turned my feet from being straight to turn them out about 15 degrees. So 90 degrees would be all the way out to the sides, and we're not going to go anywhere near that position. And so we're just going to go from a straight position to turn them out a small amount, say about 15 degrees. After you've done a couple dozen reps there, if you'd like to turn them out another small amount and experiment, of course you already know that you're going to go slow and you're going to be careful and you're not going to move fast. So these are the things that would prevent you from hurting yourself. Now there's no guarantee that someone still couldn't find a way to hurt themselves, but no one has yet that I know of been able to hurt themselves by moving very slow and working with a light amount of force. So I would turn my feet and knees out this small amount, and I would go through the same motion that you saw me do in the other video. So here, let's do a quick demonstration. So I'm going to line myself up with the vertical blue line on the field so you can see the starting point, the difference between where my hips start in the beginning and where they're going to finish off at the end. So my feet have turned out slightly, and I'm going to contract in my glutes and my hamstrings, and I feel like I'm trying to push my pelvis forward. I'm trying to feel like and think like I'm pushing my feet backwards. And then with my hip flexors up here in the front, I'm going to just kind of like kick my hips back a little bit, but I'm still squeezing back here. And then I'm going to continue on with that motion of rearward movement of the hips. And you'll remember from the other video, the beginner's position is to put the hands at the hips and push through the hips with the hands. And this is going to help support the upper body so your spine stays nice and straight. And you would be pushing back very slowly, taking several minutes to try to go through that repetition to get that stretch through there. You might notice things like in this position that the stretch actually works its way down into your calves. You might notice it all in your calves and nothing in your hamstrings, because that's coincidentally where you are the tightest. So you will always feel these stretches in the area where you're the tightest. So I might call this a hamstring stretch, but for 2 days you might feel it in your calves. It will eventually turn into a hamstring stretch. How are we going to go after those inner hamstrings? So we're going to just go from a straight foot position to bringing the feet in a few degrees, not as much as we turn them outboard. So, and I recommend that you actually pick your feet up and as you're moving, so you're not locking your hip in place and just pivoting at the foot, from the foot to the knee. So we're going to pick our feet up, and we're actually going to take small marching steps and turn those in. Everything else would really be the same. You feel like you're contracting your knees backwards slightly. You're not purposely trying to lock out in the knee joint. You do not want to lock out harshly. You're going to try to push those hips forward and then go through the same movement you saw me demonstrate. Another movement we can do to get more of a stretching sensation down the hamstrings versus the top half, because you need to realize that your hamstrings work at the top independently than the way they work at the bottom by your knee. So when we're doing, as I've been demonstrating with the hips moving backwards with a straight leg, that's primarily working the upper hamstrings, the proximal hamstrings, the distal ones, the hamstrings, the fibers at your knee. Those need to actually start from a bent knee position. So there's a lot of videos that you'll see where I'll be doing that on the floor, have the leg bent, and then pull the foot up with my hands or bands and a rope, depending on if you need some extension to help you reach that foot. But we can also do it a little bit from a standing position. It is not the exact same thing as doing it laying on your back as I just described. So for an example, a quick demonstration, and we're going to line ourselves up with that blue field so you can kind of get a good representation of the hip movement front to back. Because we're not squatting, we're not bending the knees and going down to the floor. This is a hinging position. So I'm going to start, as I'm just talking about this bent knee position, I'm going to start with a small bend, and after you've done it a few times here, you could even start a little bit deeper. So we're going to go from here. I'm going to put those hands here if you're a beginning person. They'll be out here if you're an advanced person. And we're going to just start slowly moving the hips backwards again. Feel like your sacrum is coming up to the sky. You're pushing back. If you needed to hold on to something, that would be perfectly fine to give you balance and make you feel safe and secure, and also to help minimize any chance that you would fall backwards. If you're a beginner and you haven't done this very well, you're going to be more likely to fall when you get to the very end range because you're not used to pushing yourself that far back. And I'm pushing my hips backwards. My hamstrings are stretched. And again, when we're done, we need to bend the knees sharply to take all the pressure out of the hamstrings and your lower back. Drop your hips. This is a squat position. Then come up from that. We need to come out of these stretches safely, especially if you're a bad back, a fragile back person. You need to be very careful how you come up out of those. So this has been a addendum video to go along with the basic double leg hamstring stretch. Please make sure you've watched that other video so you get all those good cues on the safety aspects and you know how to get the best stretch possible. Resistance stretching is the world's single best effective way to stretch the muscle, not to stretch the tendons. Feel free to reach out to me, ask me any questions if you need some more help or if you have some concerns with how you're doing this. You can find me on my website, Newfound Strength Fitness, and you can reach me directly, newfoundstrengthfitness@gmail.com. Thank you for watching. Be healthy, be happy.